Just remember, because I always forget right at the spur of the moment, what is this podcast called again? It's the Dungeon Masters.
The Dungeon Masters Book Club.
I've seen it written like 500 times.
We're like episode 9 or something ridiculous. No, I do odd numbers, so it's episode 8. Yeah. I never remember, but yeah, it's DM's Book Club.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dungeon Masters Book Club, or DM's Book Club if you're young, hip, and cool, like us. My name is Ryan. I am bringing you into this podcast yet again. Hope you guys are all doing well. And look, someone's with me. Who is it?
Well, it's an audio podcast, so you can't look.
No, there we go. Who is it? It's Fiona. Hello.
It's me. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, really good. Slightly hyperactive. Been knocked down too long now. How are you?
Oh dear, you've been talking too much. No, I'm all right. I had to have some. I'm sure you've had this as well, Ryan. I had to have a lot of meetings today with people who haven't done the work, and they're like, "But what do we do?" And I go, "I told you what to do." There's a lot of restrained energy.
Well, you have to go from that sort of professional dealing with people who haven't prepared, and then you have to do this with me. You know, it's terrible.
But you're always prepared. So Of
course I am. I know D&D back to front. Clearly, that's. But luckily, I'm not the one who had to super prepare for this session because it's not my topic. Would you like to tell us what we're talking about today?
So today we are going to be talking about Artificers, which I've been around in D&D, I think, for a little bit. I've got to be honest, I didn't do too much into the history of it, but sorry about that. But they are essentially come about as an official class in Eberron, the last rising of the war. I've already botched that title up, but yes, it's the new Eberron book, and I say new, it was out for about 2 years or so. And
I have to say, this Eberron book is fantastic.
It's so good.
I'm never a huge fan of books that are purely like lore that sort of jump on other people's worlds, if that makes sense. Like
a whole setting,
Yeah, like a Wildmount one, and then there's been a Magic the Gathering one, I think.
Ravnica.
Ravnica, that's it. So I was a little bit skeptical, but I have to say, Eberron has been such a good book.
It's so cool.
It is really, really cool. And specifically the Artificer. Now, this was Unearthed Arcana to start with, wasn't it? Because I remember you played one in a campaign that we did a few years ago. This was 3 years ago now, must have been.
Yes. I didn't look back at the notes, but I think I last touched those notes in 2017, which is very sad.
Something like that. And Artificers looked very different then. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Artificer in 2020?
Essentially, to discuss the Artificer, you have to think about what Eberron is. And Eberron is a setting which I like to refer to as sort of like cosmic steampunk, because you've got the magic, but it is harnessed through science. And you see these people who are inventors, and they harness the magic not like a wizard who would probably study the arcane arts and write it down, or a sorcerer who just conjure it from themselves. They actually, my favorite line is that they are the masters of unlocking magic in everyday objects. And I've got to be honest, Ryan, that sounds a lot like you and me in real life.
But finding the magic in the mediocrity that surrounds us. Yes, I like that.
I think it's true. So I definitely know this has happened to you, but at my work, my line manager will call me into a meeting and they'll tell me that we need to do something, sort of video content related, so that's what my job is about. And there'll be some questions, and then my line manager will turn and say, "Well, don't worry, Fiona's a whiz at computers, and she's good at this, and this. It's completely magic." And that's what I think Artificers are. They have learned so much, and they get so into the details and decoding the magic. That's what they love, and that's what they crave. But to everyone else, they're like, "I have no idea how you did that from a shoe." You know, it's using the mundane objects to create amazing objects. So I think it sort of goes back to when I first started getting into D&D. So we're talking about 5 years ago. I know I'm still a newbie technically, but I remember at the time I was put into a campaign. Yeah, it was enjoyable and stuff. I was playing a gnome paladin because I thought it was funny that I'd play a knight who was short. I don't know. And I enjoyed it, but I was like, because I didn't get to pick it. I was like, I don't really connect with it. And I was going through all the lists, and I was like, well, some of these seem too aggressive. Like, I don't know about a barbarian. I don't know about a wizard. I don't know about proper magic. So I was really stuck. And then we started talking about doing our own D&D campaign. And at that time, I was getting into other things like D&D streams, and there's a stream that everyone will know is Critical Role. And one of the characters on it, because they were playing sort of from, by the time of their first season, they were from sort of level 11 or level 9, I think, sorry, all the way up to sort of level 20.
Yeah, it was quite a high level campaign at the time, because most things people watched were very low level and very sort of beginning of D&D focused.
So this was like the first time we'd ever seen sort of high level combat, high level D&D and role play at such a level, and a continued story. So it did feel like, you know, you would tune in every week to find out. What happened later on, though, and massive spoilers if you've not listened or watched it, I appreciate the season is like 150 episodes long, and each episode is like 4 or 5 hours, so forgive me.
And we're talking a few years ago now. Like, this is been and gone,
Yeah. So one of the characters played by Sam Riegel died in a really, really horrific combat. But they'd got to that point where they were so high level that they could just bring people back to life like that, essentially. And so that's what they kept doing. They kept just, you know, bringing people back, and there's a way of mechanic and high level, etc. Anyway, the character sort of died at the end of an episode. And we're like, oh no, what are we doing? Well, don't worry, we can bring him back. And then the next episode, Sam Riegel goes, you know, as his character goes, no, you should not have brought me back. I was not ready to do so. And leaves the party. A really dramatic scene. You're like, oh my God. Holy shit. Because it sounded like Sam himself had left the player group. And then a couple of scenes later, they meet a new character called Tyrion Darrington, who was an Artificer. And this was just maybe a couple of weeks after the Unearthed Arcana Artificer came out. And it blew my mind, not only because the role play is such a high level, but instantly had this character who wasn't necessarily a fighter, wasn't necessarily a wizard or anything like that, but could make something, and had a creature with them, which was basically like a mechanical servant that would help them write stuff down or protect them in battle, as well as doing a bit of magic as well. And that's, for me, is why I really like Artificers, is that they add so much in terms of flavor. They can add a lot in terms of storytelling. And yeah, as soon as I sort of saw this, I thought, I need to learn how to play it. And then we started playing it, and I was like, oh, some of it I'm very squishy, and I've run out of spells already.
Yeah, the Unearthed Arcana version we had to do a bit of tweaking to make it work. Like, a lot of the ideas were very, very good and sound when these, like any class gets skills as you go along. And it kind of felt a little bit like you'd get a skill, it would be quite good, and then very quickly it would become obsolete, and you would have to get the next skill. And we had to sort of tweak it a little bit to make it work. But this feels fully fledged and definitely brought into the game. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Artificer and how it works?
Yeah, so essentially, like most classes, they have sort of specialities, and you have 3 very similar but slightly different, I like to say, but they essentially are alchemist, who is the one that sort of is involved with all the potions and stuff, can create sort of great concoctions, poisons, smoke bombs, etc. You've got then the artillerist, which is sort of D&D's way of putting guns or gun-like elements into a game. Certainly when you think of Eberron, they will have access to gunpowder, they'll have access to cannons. Why would they not equip their troops with something similar if they can? And again, that's quite an interesting point. And then you have something which you can tell I love this one, called the Battlesmith, where you have a person running onto the battlefield, saving people or protecting people, but with them they have their trusty metal servant, a steel defender, which could take any shape you want. And in the book, in the image, it takes a shape of a big dog. And instantly I was like, yes, that is exactly what I want, a big dog, metal.
It's really, really cool. Big jowly dog with ears. And it's like a mastiff, isn't it? Like some big dog like that. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Made of sheer metal as well. It's really awesome.
And yeah, so it is a mixture of being able to invent things. One of the sort of the key thing that all artificers have is sort of magical tinkering right really early on, where they can imbue certain properties into objects, mundane objects. So they talk about like putting light into an object, the spell light, making recorded messages, continuously emitting an odor of your choice. I think they mean sort of like the smell of fire burning or something rather than farts.
I was thinking farts. No, I was. You got me on that one exactly. I thought that's exactly what it was going for.
And then some sort of visual image. And I think one of the things I've realized when reading through sort of the Artificer, there certainly is a not a feat but one of the features, that they get later on called, was it a flash of genius, which I love. And all these things are about having to figure out how to solve a problem that's not fighting it, and maybe not necessarily talking about it, but it's using all of your skills, all the things to create. And that really sort of draws to me. So like stuff like the magical tinkering, for example, these are sort of the objects that you could use for role play, but also use them as a distraction. You use them to light certain areas, or draw people closer to an area you want them to go to, and then get the surprise on them.
It's somewhere between a sort of Sherlock approach and MacGyver, if you ever watched. I mean, we're really getting old now, but like, yeah, and magical tinkering, I think the way I read this is it's sort of like a specific cantrip, effectively, that the artificers can use. I mean, it doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would be good if you've got to level 20, but it's fun stuff. And yeah, it's really, really good fun. I liked the sort of range of different things. And I have to say, I do like that there is now another intelligence-based class in D&D. Like the wizard was the only one that used intelligence, apart from, I think, Eldritch Knights fighters.
I was going to say that when I was reading this, like, because it talks about obviously multiclassing as well, because some people would do that, and it's like, what would you do? And
arcane tricksters, I think, rogues.
Yeah, that's it, rogues as well. So instantly you're like, well, yeah, you'd have a wizard, maybe wizard artificer. That makes sense, but then otherwise, yeah, the wizard, you can't really pair it with anything else, and that's kind of sad. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and having intelligence is it's a skill I think that people very quickly will neglect when building a sort of optimized character. So it's good to see it sort of pop up in different forms. And you actually get like a really good range of skills, of equipment as well. I think, so they start with medium armor and shields, which is pretty good for a class. Very defendable. I mean, spellcasters, generally speaking, can be pretty squishy, but these ones, D8, it's not great, but it's good enough. Bit of health, yeah. And optional rule firearm proficiency. That's just always to keep things a little bit interesting, I think.
Definitely. And again, in Critical Role, there was the rules of not necessarily relating to artificers, but so one of the other characters, Percy, is a gunslinger, which I think would have been sort of a similar sort of build. If the artificer was around before then, probably would have been an artificer. And the idea that having guns in this world is actually really dangerous, and only certain people who know how to use them should use them. So taking that sort of element into D&D, where not many people will have access to these things, and then suddenly being able to create them, but then, can you use them for good? And that's where sort of the artillerist is quite interesting, because obviously in Eberron, they were used to fight this great war. And then after the war was finished, they'd actually realized that maybe they need to use their power for good. So artificers themselves, they are a class that is meant to save people, but they can also, really hurt a lot of people as well. So again, that sort of good and bad balance.
Yeah, I like to think of them as sort of it's like a utility class for people who don't want to be the bard. Bard often is the sort of jack of all trades. You can do some magic, you can do some combat, you can do some social stuff, and you have to be somebody that's good with words or with music. And if necessarily you're not an outgoing personality, it could be quite a difficult class to play. So an artificer, I think, is a good second take on that, of somebody who can, as you say, do a bit of everything. They've certainly got skills that kind of fly everywhere. So, I mean, the first interesting thing that I saw was that it's a half spellcasting class, so only going up to 5th level rather than to 9th, which puts it on par with a ranger and a paladin, which are the two that I can immediately think of that are half spellcasting classes. And neither of those, a ranger and a paladin, rely on spells as their primary function. Spells are kind of like a backup, and it's actually the skills of the class that do it. So I think that's what they're going for with the Artificer. You're not meant to be a pure spellcaster. You're supposed to use your Artificer spells. There are definitely some cool ones. I mean, was there anything that just from so obviously we divide into two sections. We've got the skills that every Artificer has, and then obviously you've got the branch skills, so depending on what sort of Artificer you pick. Was anything popped up in the main branch that you thought was quite cool? I'm just having a look at things like the infuse item is quite an important one, I think.
I think infuse item, really, really useful. You can touch a non-magical object, imbue it with one of your infusions, which again we'll probably come on to later, and put that into a magic item, which, really, really useful. For me, like I think I said before, flash of genius. So you gain the ability to come up with solutions under pressure. Instantly, I'm like, tick, I could do with that. When you or another creature you can see within 30 feet makes an ability check or a saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. So again, a bit like sort of, I do know what it's called. It's David's saving thing for us, but it's like a cloak of protection or something.
Sort of the paladin aura of courage or something.
Aura of courage, any of the auras of paladin. It's very similar, I think, but it's nice that you could use it as a reaction. So you can see someone go, oh no, you don't, and that's quite nice that you can do it to someone else, and that's at 7th level. I think it's actually quite a powerful thing to use as your reaction. Obviously, that opens it up for you failing it or you getting hit by something as well, because your armor class might not be as high. But I thought that was quite a nice sort of possible flavor thing where you go you reach out and grab something, and I think that maybe that's it for me. Is that artificers, you said they're sort of a utility thing, but I feel like they can be brave, but they're not necessarily the fighters. They're not going to be at the front, but they can have some sort of really cool heroic moments as a result.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just having a look through the spell list and sort of having a look and seeing what they've got. There's a distinct lack of combat spells. Looking at it, there's cantrips that are, firebolt's a pretty standard high damage one, but apart from that, there's no fireballs, there's no magic missiles, no lightning bolts, nothing in that range. Bigby's hand, though, you'll be pleased to see, has made it in.
My favourite spell, which I didn't realise needed concentration.
Of course it does. It's a huge hand. To be fair, there's a couple of spells like that don't use concentration, so I can see why. Haste is a good one, though. So there are some proper wizard spells in this list that normally only the true spellcasters can use. So that's quite cool. Yeah, no, I like the Flash of Genius. For me, the thing that stands out about this, so obviously Infuse item is, it's kind of like another take, I think, on Warlock invocations. It's probably the closest thing I can describe it to, where you've got this huge list of things you can do and you can pick a number of them. And I think actually you can take quite a few, up to 12 by the end of the list, which is quite a lot of them actually. But then Magic Item Adept.
Yes.
That was quite cool. So actually being able to break the usual rule of D&D and have more than 3 magic items. Now, for me, that struck me as being one of those things where if you were such a person that was a sort of min-maxer in the game, there are distinctly magical items that have been put into the game that rely on the fact that you can't have more than 3 of them equipped at any one point, because it would be the combinations would begin to get a little bit crazy. And I can imagine you doing at high level some quite remarkable things to get like 6 magical items on you.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
But again, that sort of makes sense for me, because obviously, like you said, the spells you get, certainly from the base tree, they're not attacking spells, so you might need some extra protection around yourself. So I can imagine at least one being like a cloak that can make you fly, or a teleport, or not a diffusion cloak. That's not what I'm thinking of.
Like a displacement cloak.
That's the one. Diffusion cloak. That's something else that I've invented, and you can't have that, wizards. But going on to then the 3 specialist classes that are sort of in the Eberron book, I will come to the 4th one that has been sort of announced, the Armorist, which I think is really interesting. So the first one, the Alchemist, and this technically, when I think back to it, this is what my original Artificer was, being able to create elixirs. So at level 3, after you finish a long rest, you can magically produce an experimental elixir from an empty flask you touch, which is, I'm going to be honest, it does sound like you're about to have a wee into a flask. That's what it's essentially
what it is, I think. It's a magical creation with different coloured urine that may pop out, like a prismatic spray of some kind, into a bottle.
Yeah, but what's cool? What's cool is that obviously you roll a d6 and randomly you get assigned it, but then you could expend a spell slot to create another, or choose which one you want. So again, that could be helpful, and certainly later on, if you want to be like, okay, you get a healing potion, you get a swiftness potion, etc., rather than relying on the randomness of the dice. But again, I like that as a sort of a role play thing. You're just starting out as an artificer and you go, test this. I don't know what it does, but it's going to do something, and then just stand back and watch. Like the 6 on the d6 is a transformation spell as an alter self for 10 minutes, which again could be very, very useful at low levels if you need to sneak in somewhere and pretend to be someone else.
Flight as well is remarkably useful. I mean, there's some really cool effects here. I think the healing one, that is just basically a sort of healing potion, isn't it? It's just a common healing potion, so perhaps isn't the most exciting thing, but it's definitely really cool.
And then later on, obviously these things increase at levels, but then like at 15th level, you get Chemical Mastery, where you can just cast Greater Restoration and heal without expending a spell slot, without preparing it, without material components, providing you've got your alchemical supplies as your focus. So that's incredibly powerful as well.
Yeah.
And actually
Heal
thinking
is
about
a 6th level spell, I think, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, exactly. But I think, and that's really interesting as well, which again wasn't in the original Unearthed Arcana one, is that you can prepare Artificer spells very similar to Cleric, I think. So you can just pick which ones you want. That's
Cleric
so helpful.
And Druids. So the whole spell list is available to you. I like that. I have to say that some of my favorite classes in D&D, like the Sorcerer, I've always had a soft spot for ever since like 3rd edition, where they were sort of the underused lesser form of wizards who were clearly better. And I always liked Sorcerers because they seemed a little bit downtrodden, but they just the lack of number of spells that you can learn has always been a bit of a problem. So I like the fact they can switch between all the spells. That's quite cool. That's really awesome.
And again, the talk about like, how do you prepare spells? Well, normally you'd either meditate or you pray to your gods. Artificers just get all their stuff out and start tinkering with stuff and go, right, this used to heal, but it now heats metal. Done. And again, another great sort of role play element in that. So again, just a way to sort of the flavoring of it. That's what I really like. And I think just it's something different. I feel like when you think of fantasy, you instantly think of Dungeons and Dragons, but you think of castles, you think of sort of riding on horseback and stuff. And this is not it. It is just changing it slightly to be a bit different and to have stories that do include like you making something and it working, but no one else has the same knowledge. And it's actually not forbidden knowledge, but it can, in the wrong hands, cause a war or anything like that. And yeah, I'm 100% all in for that as well.
This really starts to bind. I'm just thinking there's a sort of little section back on a page that talks about the magic of how they work things. And you're right, it's not necessarily just using pure magic, it's using sort of tools and things. I just love the ability to just every single spell in this can be replicated with some sort of different gunk that you're creating. So I just love that image. It's really, there's something quite nice about it. But yeah, another thing, alchemists, terrific healers actually. Lots of different healing spells, buffing spells, things that you can do which seem really cool. Being able to use healing word and mass healing word is an incredibly useful thing for a non-healing class. So it's definitely, I could see an alchemist being a really good addition to a party. The artillerist I find a bit different. This is the one out of the three I kind of struggle to get my head around the most. And I think maybe you can explain it a little better to me. The Eldritch Cannon seems like a very strange construction in terms of mechanically and how it works.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this feels to me, and I know people may be like, oh, it's fine, but I do feel it is shoehorning the fact that you can create guns, essentially. So the artillerist specializes in using magic to hurl energy or projectiles, explosions across the battlefield. They are like a ranged fighter at this point. And being able to create a cannon, and that's the thing, it's an eldritch cannon, but essentially it is a gun. At the beginning you can only create one cannon at a time, which is probably good. Again, that's it's interesting. Like, it's got an AC, it's got an amount of hit points as well. You can choose if it has legs. I thought that was quite good. I have versions of sort of Borderlands, the sort of the gun on legs wandering through, but it disappears after an hour or reduced to 0 hit points. Again, it's that sort of thing where I think I like the idea. It makes sense in a way, but at the same time, it does feel a little bit overpowered. Like, it has the number of health times your Artificer level. Oh, and it's immune to poison, psychic, and all condition statuses. Just in case you weren't sure.
Because it is a walking cannon. You can't mind control this thing. Yeah, it's weird because I mean, unless I'm reading this sort of strangely, but all of its abilities seem to activate on a bonus action, and I'm just double checking this to see if that's right. But so it's like another attack on top. So I imagine, what would you do with your action? You'd be casting cantrips, or you'd be casting other things like that, presumably. And this is sort of extra damage. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? But
But I do like they give the option. So the Eldritch Cannons, they have sort of 3 versions of it. You've got the flamethrower one, you've got the force ballista one, which is like a typical gun one, and then you have a protector one, where it's more as a force field, or it gives out sort of energy, and you get a temporary hit points. And I quite like that one better. So you don't have to have guns that kill. It's all about protecting and giving that sort of defense. So I quite like that. And then you have the arcane firearm, where basically at 5th level you can turn any one staff or rod into an arcane firearm, so a conduit for you to use your destructive powers, on top of having a cannon as well. It's just I don't know, it's a lot to think about. Oh, and you can
There's a lot of extra D8s
on
and
stuff,
extra things to do, and yeah, like I could see a lot of what the Artificers do is basically just to clog up your initiative roll as much as you can and make you think about as many things as you possibly can.
Yeah,
there's definitely that as a rolling theme.
Which makes sense. They are inventors, so they're trying to like do all the advantage and stuff. But yeah, I did see the Artificers one. I was like, no, that's a bit too much for me. Yeah,
exactly. To be fair, I think it's probably the most mechanically simple in the sense that when you get your head around the uses of the actions and the bonus actions, it's a pure damage casting thing. With Protector gives a little bit of temporary health if you want to put that on your cannon, but generally speaking, it's more damage for people that like to do damage. I have to say, the Alchemist, I think, is a lot more interesting. Just having the randomness of the elixirs, it all seems to be quite useful, and
exactly
extra healing and also damage that you can do with that. I think that's quite cool. You said from the outset that the Battlesmith was the one that got your attention. Is that purely because of the dog, or no, is it more than that?
It's not just the dog. I think like it is nice to have something, because in the original Unearthed Arcana at level 6 you would get your mechanical servant, which we never got to because obviously we had to finish our campaign. And I think what was interesting is that you had that in addition to your alchemical stuff. But now you just have it as is, and actually, like, it's got some really good. I think, like, the Vigilant can't be surprised, which is always really helpful.
It's always really good.
And I just don't know. It just something about it made sense, and it doesn't have to be. You can choose what it looks like as well, and that doesn't affect how it is and stuff like. So obviously they've gone for a dog in this one, but you could make it into sort of a bird. You can make it into some sort of like. Essentially, I think it is just having a metal Pokemon with you. I think I've got to that stage.
It's a metal Pokemon, and actually, unlike in the old Artificer style, this one you can actually repair properly as well, which is a really, really cool thing. I think the one thing that I didn't spot about this in terms of what the Defender can do that slipped through was the reaction. I think the reaction is probably the most useful thing that it can do, and that's imposing disadvantage on an attack roll around it. So as long as the Defender's by you, people can't hit you, which I think is really intriguing. That's like having the not using your own reaction to what was the Fighters and Paladins can learn the battle style. Is it the Protector one? I think
it might be. Yes, it's definitely not Repose. I don't know why I said Repose.
Yeah,
it's Protector. Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Having a Defender that can actually protect you. Gives it a little bit of purpose.
And you got like the Arcane Jolt as well. Again, another cool thing. You can channel magical energy through when you strike something. Extra 2d6 force damage. That's quite good. Or you can make it into healing. I was going to say healing damage there. No.
Healing damage,
Healing energy.
Against vampires, I think that would be fair.
But you can only do it a certain number of times per, and only once on a turn. But again, all helps essentially. And I thought that was quite cool. Again, that you could channel that energy to be a protector, not just damage as well.
Absolutely. I like this one. I have to say, having proficiency with weapons, getting an extra attack, this to me feels like another take on like a ranger or some combat class that isn't necessarily all about combat, and it uses other skills to sort of jump around with. I try and think about whether or not it can keep up with a fighter, because a fighter is like a pure damage dealing class, and they've got, your martial abilities and all kinds of stuff that goes along with that. And actually, I think with the Defender and with the spells that you can cast, these guys, they seem pretty reliable, actually, and interesting to play. Definitely interesting to play.
Yeah, and even just looking at their spells now, they've got, it's, again, attacking, combative spells. So you've got, like, Branding Smite, the Fire Shield, again, that's quite cool, that's 13th level. Vanishing Smite, but you've also got Mass Cure Wounds as well, and Shield and stuff. So again,
Mass Cure Wounds is a very good spell, actually.
Yeah, really, really it's very good. So again, you can just be in the middle of the battlefield and you can just heal as many people, and then you'd like to tell Rover to go and make sure people get disadvantage on you so you don't get hit.
Okay, sir, I shall do that for you. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have to say, the Battlesmith was, and I have to say, the artwork in this book is terrific.
So good.
The Battlesmith does a particularly badass.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if they were going for the Lady Brienne sort of approach to the.
You know me. I was more thinking of Ellie from Borderlands in a way.
True.
You know,
that's very true. Yes, no, that's a good shout. Oh, I love Ellie. She's so cool.
Oh, I love Ellie.
Yeah, the redneck that you wish you knew.
Gonna get some wheels. That's it. I don't know anymore. Can't do any more of that accent.
Those are the 3 different classes. So I think combining the abilities that you've got with the main Artificer abilities, you have a character with a lot of spells, a decent amount of spell slots, not a huge amount, but they've also got cantrips, they've also got little class abilities, and then they've also got these infusions, which I think adds the next and probably the most important layer in terms of making your Artificer quite unique, because there are some cool different choices here, I think, and you start with 4 right from the get-go at level 2.
I know. So cool. So yeah, so these artist infusions, as you sort of rightly said, they're a bit like the warlock invocations and stuff. So you have a certain amount, and obviously at certain levels you can gain them. The one that we definitely come across in our own campaigns is the replicate magic item, where you can create, spend some time to create a magic item, and you can take this one as many times as you want to get higher up magic items, and it says what you can do in certain levels and if they need attunement or not. But straight off the bat, looking at level 2, you can get stuff like a bag of holding, which is incredibly useful when you're so low level.
Very useful, yeah.
You've got Goggles of Night, which again very useful. There's one I didn't really look it up, but it says prosthetic limb, which I didn't check. I didn't know what that was.
I can't believe you didn't check it. He says scrolling to that bit. Just
exactly. Well, whilst you do that, you've got stuff like sending stones. Again, incredibly useful when you're low level and you don't necessarily have people who have sending spells or message. What was the other one? A rope of climbing. So you can shoot up a rope and be able to climb up, or you can tie itself to an area that you don't need to make a check for. It's already tied. So that's amazing stuff you can get for level 2. And obviously, as you get further and further up, you've got like the stuff of elven kinds, so like cloaks and boots. And if you get all the way to the 14th level, you have a choice of getting stuff like, of course, my favorite ever magic item is the Horn of Blasting. Such a
Give
good
that Horn of Blast, exactly.
The fact you could make that would be great.
You know what? The thing about these magical items is the thing with infusions as well is that it has to be on a non-magical item. So you essentially create this from scratch. You can't put anything on a magical item that's already magical. Effectively. But all of these things, and you can do everything from move fast to fly, to go invisible, to go stealthy, to do skills, to breathe underwater. Like every single environment can be used with an infusion. And you can switch infusions between levels as well.
That's really useful.
You can give up an infusion, you can take a new one. I think Artificers could be prepared for pretty much every single campaign environment I could think of. I mean, you could throw one into a volcano, which we've just done in our campaign recently, and there are things that deal with fire in here, or go underwater, or be able to fly, or all kinds of stuff. I just think they've got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, definitely. And like for me, the sort of the biggest thing that's going back to that replicate magic item, they can make a ring of free action, which gives you another action in combat. That could be so useful. And again, these magic items, you don't have to, obviously, they're not just for you. You could make them for other people. Yeah. And I think that, I can't remember which one it is now. I think it's one of the, I think there's an infusion, or there's something in the lower level where you can infuse a spell, level 1 or level 2, into an object. And then you can cast it as your action. But it doesn't have to be you. It could be anyone. You could say you get a stone, you put magic missile in it, and you give it to the fighter, and you go, if you need it, just use that. And that's so powerful. Like, again, it's a way to sort of, you are using up spell slots and stuff, but you can store it and then give people a quick sort of like, oh, you need to escape. Here's a tactical retreat or whatever it is.
Spell storing item. The thing about that as well, and again, I didn't read this until I read it the second time, but the spell stays in the object until it's been used a number of times equal to twice your intelligence modifier. So if you were to, for instance, put Cure Wounds in it, and you had an intelligence modifier of +4, say, you could use Cure Wounds 4 times before it ran out. Like, it's so good.
Yeah. Again, very helpful if you're just going to do that and give it to people. Again, like you said, it's not just about the Artificer, it is about other people. So, because I think, like we said, so the Artificer can get up to 6 magic items, which they could make, or they can buy or whatever, but then they could create stuff for other people. And I think that's so powerful as well, because I don't think many other classes can do that.
Yeah.
And it encourages that sort of thing of being, well, I would say, teamwork, and instead of being like, what do you need? Give me a few weeks.
Give me an idea.
I will get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Give me something to play off, and I will come up with something for the situation. Yeah, they're really, really cool. And normally the complexity in a class comes if you get level 9 spells and you're having to pick which ones to pick, because wizards, clerics, druids always have the problem where you have a long rest and suddenly you've got this heap of spells you're trying to work out. But I think with every single one of these skills and every single one of these abilities, you're going to have as much fun trying to make the character in the first place as you would trying to manage a wizard or anything. And there's so many options.
Definitely.
Absolutely, so many. And every time you read this list, you will see something different.
And you go, that'll be good. Yeah. That's the thing. I think the Artificer just encourages you to think things outside the box. And like I said, like, it's not, sometimes you just can't go in and fight the big bad, even though you're likely to. What can you do to give yourself an advantage?
Exactly. And I have to say, all of these things have, there's kind of extra things as well. So if you are a combat artificer, I'm just having a look, you could put enhanced defense on your shield, which gives you, an extra AC. You could give yourself a bit of weapon damage. You could give yourself a radiant weapon. You can give yourself, if you were an artillerist, then you could do the arcane focus one, which gives you the extra damage to combat, or extra, spell attack rolls.
Yeah, repeating shot as well. Quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not having to worry about ammo is quite a fun thing indeed.
Yeah, it just produces its own. I was like, oh wow. And then obviously, if you really wanted something which is a bit like the Steel Defender but went for a different class, you could also take the Homunculus Servant, which maybe is the one thing I will say that I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a fan of the word homunculus.
What's wrong with it?
So this is going to be incredibly niche, but so there's a TV show called The League of Gentlemen. And in the film of The League of Gentlemen, they create a homunculus, and it's disgusting. It's supposed to be horrific. And obviously, homunculus in this, they're supposed to be sort of tiny constructs or tiny sort of creatures and stuff. But all I can see is just a hideous, like almost like an imp-like creature, like, Master, you've made me. Give me life. You like. I'm like, oh. But again, that could be a really that could be a really cool roleplay thing where you created it and you go, buddy, and it's like, and then everyone else is like, oh, I don't think it's well. Oh, but it's my friend. It's okay.
And the thing I like about these infusions as well is that especially the homunculus, you might decide that it's not very useful. You can switch it back out again, which is quite fun. If you've got enhanced weapon and you pick up a magic sword, again, you can switch out again, which I think is really fun. The Artificer, you know what? I could see myself playing one of these. I'm not entirely sure which one I would go for. I think I would be tempted. I think mechanically, my favorite one is the Alchemist.
I was going to say the Alchemist, yeah.
I think, in terms of just pure damage output, I think the Artillerist probably is better than you would think it is once you started playing
Once you got your head around it, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of coolness, I think having 2 attacks and a pet dog would be pretty awesome as well. I think I'd have a butler. Definitely a butler, like a metal-plated butler that just follows you around.
The new sort of Unearth Arcana speciality one is called the Armourer, which essentially boils down to, it says here, it's an artificer who specializes in armor and modifies it to act like a second skin. So essentially it is, you are Tony Stark.
Yeah, and you're Iron Man. That seems to be
it is pretty much Iron Man. And it totally makes sense. So you get stuff like Magic Missile and Shield, you get Shatter, Hypnotic Pattern, and Wall of Force on your final sort of level. And yeah, it's quite, again, it's one of those things where, again, I kind of only quickly looked at it before we came into it, but actually it's still being tested and stuff, because it talks about where it's...
I was going to say, is it Unearthed Arcana still?
Yeah, it's still Unearthed Arcana. Let me look at it, what it says. Can have it, so it has the following sort of features. You get Thunder Gauntlets, so each of your armor fists counts as a simple melee weapon and deals 1d8 thunder damage on a hit. So again, you can just punch things and cause thunder damage. Defensive Field, so that you gain a bonus action to use on each of your turns to gain temporary hit points equal to your level in your class. And so that will be your, replacing any temporary hit points you already have, but you lose them if you doff the armor. So you just have them until you come out of your armor.
That's incredibly, like, it's a huge amount of extra health. I mean, you become quite quite spongy with that. I reckon they'll get rid of that. Anything that you can do an unlimited amount of times.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to have it a certain number of times for your like intelligence model before you take a long rest or something.
Yeah, I could imagine a lot of these skills for an artificer they're all long rest ones. So you've got to be careful you don't use all your abilities at once, I think would be something
that's right. Yeah, so it is armor model, so you can choose either for it to have thunder gauntlets or a defensive field or something called a guard. You can change what it says, so you can't have it all. That's why I was like, God, it's it's completely overpowered. But yeah, it is pretty cool. Again, it makes sense that you would have something that's a bit more defensive rather than a gun or throwing potions or chemicals or having a big metal dog. You'd have a big metal suit, so that it does make sense. But yeah, again, it probably needs a bit more tweaking. Otherwise, you just gain temporary hit points and still punch the hell out of things. So.
Yeah, definitely. So I think quite clearly you would play one of these. I think that's without doubt.
What gave that away?
We're probably plotting how to kill your character in our campaign right now, just so you can switch over.
I don't know. I've got triple digit health now. I don't think I'll ever see that with an artificer. So,
oh, don't tempt me. But is there anything about this bit that you didn't like, or you'd change in terms of just things that you don't think quite work as well, or ideas that you think just fell a bit flat or short of the mark?
I don't know. It's a very weird thing. I think a lot of people. Obviously right now in the US, and there's a lot of stuff about guns and gun laws. So I do feel it's that sort of looking beyond the veil, going, oh, there's this mysterious thing it shoots out lightning and all that sort of thing, but it is essentially a gun. But we do have ranged weapons like crossbows and arrows and stuff like that. So it makes sense at some point you will get there. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's my own issue with sort of guns and gun laws and stuff, but it might make for a very, very interesting story. I think because here, compared to what I saw on sort of Critical Role, there was a good mechanic, which I thought may be something I would use. So if you did decide to create or have more weaponry in the Forgotten Realms or in your campaigns, the idea is that you're not proficient with it. It is a new, untested sort of weaponry. So that if you roll, you have to, every time, it's a bit like a Wild Magic Surge, you roll a d20, and if you get a 1, your gun jams or it breaks or something like that, and you have to spend your turn repairing it. Because obviously it is, if you hit, it's really damaging, and people don't know what to do or how to protect against it, because it is such a weapon of violence. So I maybe would include rules about that per se. But I think that's just me and sort of my politics issues. But D&D is a politics game, so
it depends on what sort of campaigns you choose, doesn't it?
I'll tell you a thing that I really liked, actually, and it just reminded me, again, going back to what we did. One of the first early things it says about artificers is that they love to create, they're great, but they are insanely jealous of anyone else. So it has a really good prompt. So say, what is the relationship between you and the person who taught you your craft? You say, like, okay, that makes sense that you would, as a blacksmith or anything like that, you would have smithy guildmaster or whatever teaching you as a mother or father figure, etc. But then it asks about rivals, and instantly for me, and I'm like, oh, it is a bit like, again, like Pokemon. You have Ash versus Gary. You can have sibling. You can have sibling. Oh, you can have brother and sister rivalry. You can
have siblings. I think definitely siblings. Yeah, so lots of siblings everywhere.
So, and that's what I did in our campaign. It asked about a rival, and I said, well, I have a twin brother who thinks he's better than me. And then you used it against me, and I was shocked and appalled that you did. And it was great.
It's terrible, isn't it? Why would the DM use a rival against you?
But it's a nice motivator, I think. So again, so it's not like you can make it so that your artificer is like, well, I've worked so hard on this, so I must be the best. And if someone bests you, what are you going to do? You're going to go right back to the workshop. I need to beat them. And it's, again, that's a really cool story that you can get into. So I love that idea that it wasn't necessarily about you've lost your parents, you're a lone orphan, an edgelord, etc. It is between you and this other person. And this other person could also be competitive, or they could be super, super nice and be like, oh, I'm so glad you're so better luck next time. And you're like,
damn you.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't believe the lies.
They may look nice and everything, but actually, they're just awful.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a very clever class. I think it's one of those classes where certainly I first read it and I didn't get the point. I thought it would be too weak and too all over the place. But I think if you were to play it and give it a go and really start combining the skills up and building something, this is definitely a sort of class I think that you could definitely min-max quite a lot to creating something that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Really cool.
And the final thing I would say is that if you're looking for some inspiration for what can artificers be like, if anyone's been watching She-Ra, Princesses of Power, there is a princess called Entrapta, who varies. All the princesses have powers, but her thing is to create bots and stuff. And so she actually helps the evil guys out for a little bit, but because of her passion to create robots and stuff like that, and her Steel Defender technically is a robot called Emily. And it's super sweet because obviously she's just trying to help, but she doesn't know how because she gets so distracted with trying to create bots and trying to work out how they work and how can she save the world, but gets distracted by her own thoughts and processes. So I highly recommend looking at that as an Artificer inspiration.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, I was going to say the last thing I was going to sort of ask was, obviously this comes in the Eberron book, and the Eberron world is very well defined and there's lots of different ideas. And it's definitely the Artificer described as being part of that world and like a sort of high magic thing. I mean, how would you go about bringing an Artificer into a regular campaign? So if we were using one that was sort of then more high fantasy, Lord of the Rings style, or definitely more traditional D&D, I mean, do you think there's a problem with somebody bringing an Artificer into that sort of environment? I mean, how would you go about that?
It's a very interesting point. So I think it would more boil down to the player and the DM's way of flavoring it. So you have to really describe and go out of your way to use words that aren't necessarily like gun or anything like that, and be able to describe what you're doing and describe it in so much detail that even maybe the players themselves have no idea what is going on. And this makes it so complicated. And it's just a new form of magic, maybe a secret magic. I mean, I obviously, with my Artificer, was a gnome character. And I sort of made it in my head that it's a guild, the clan of the gnomes. They have this knowledge that it's gone from father to son to mother to daughter, etc. So again, it could be a hidden thing that only these clans know, and they've got to protect the tradition in some way. And so outsiders can't see it. So you'll be in big trouble if someone spots you on the Parchment Daily paper with your drawing of you and your Steel Defender. You're like, ugh. But it could end up as a hijinks as well. You have to sort of hide magic in a way, or to do things, but if magic's not allowed or banned in some place, how do you go about that? Because you'll be able to do it, you just need to think really cleverly about how to do that. It's just a normal shoe, or it's a wand, and that's a dog, I puppet it, So
yeah, I like to think that Santa would be an Artificer, if that's what Santa is.
A bag of holding, pulling out all his sort of like...
Yeah, with his Steel Defender, a reindeer that pulls a sleigh that's been tinkered to fly.
Well, I can't wait for this spin-off one-shot, Ryan.
Absolutely. This is a Christmas miracle all in one. I like it. No, I think it's tough, isn't it? I like gnomish culture, as it's described in D&D, being very, they love life and they just love exploration and secrets and knowledge and learning and stories and everything. They just have a lust for it. And I think gnomes and artificers work very well together, and obviously humans with their more short lives and sort of spark to learn, I think works quite well. You could throw dwarves at it, I think, or elves.
Would be good. Yeah,
absolutely. I believe it's sort of a longer life potentially. I couldn't say, or maybe an orc with intelligence, maybe an artificer as opposed to a wizard, because they don't have training, so they're just experimenting with things that they find. Maybe more,
that would be really cool as well. Yeah,
a low tech artificer, maybe.
That'd be really cool. But I will say, if you are playing gnomes, you have to go for the high voice, because that's how we've done it in our campaign. They've all got little high voices.
Yeah, all small people have high voices.
Because you're further away from them.
Yeah, I'm actually 2'9", just so you know.
Hello, look at my dog.
So thank you. I feel like I know a lot about Artificers now, and I can't wait to play one. Really
good. Fun. I can't wait either. What is next week's topic, Ryan? I'm excited. What is it? Okay.
No, not getting it. No.
Oh God, this is
sea shanties.
Is it a terrible dad pun? I don't know. So it's
No.
pirates of some sort, right?
Yeah, pirates.
Right.
We're going to be talking all about ships and ship battles in D&D and how we as dungeon masters can bring in naval combat and naval transportation and ships of the line and rowboats and all kinds of things. And specifically, we're going to take a look at one of the appendixes at the back of the Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
Yeah.
Rules on how to use boats and how to crew them. Say in your campaign, you want to give your characters access to their own boat or vessel. Or maybe they kidnap something and are trying to sail it away. Or maybe they're on a ship and they want to get involved. There's all kinds of different rules in there. So we'll go through that.
I'm excited. Oh, that's going to be fun. Ship-tastic. No.
It's a pile of ship. That's what it is.
Brilliant. So, Ryan, where can we find you in the internet?
Well, normally I just sit here and say you should come find me on YouTube, but actually I'm going to do a different plug this time.
What?
I have a Discord server. You should come and find me on Discord. I'm called Ursa Ryan. Come find me and we can talk. It could be great.
To talk about what, though, Ryan?
Well, anything. D&D,
wow.
Artificer classes, that's quite an important thing. Your particular flavor of dragons. I mean, we can go across all kinds of episodes.
Fair enough.
Where can we find you? What are you up to?
Where can we find me? I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast.
How often, sorry?
Twice monthly.
Twice monthly, okay, good. Not every 2 months, but twice monthly.
No, you know what? When I first started out, I had to really think about how I had to say it. Because, you get that. People do ask if it's once every 2 months. And
bi-monthly,
bi-monthly. It's like
2 weekly.
Americans don't understand fortnight as a term or a phrase. It is.
It's a terrible game, and I always preferred PUBG. I'll be honest.
God, I'll edit this from the podcast, right?
No, you won't.
Yeah, no, I won't. I'm lazy. All right.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I'll wrap it up so that you don't have to hear any more of my jokes. See you next time for a conversation on pirates. Bye.
Yar.